I'm Marcus, 32 years old, and until last year, I would have done anything for my brother Trevor. After our parents died, I sacrificed everything to raise him and put him through college. I even paid his $75,000 annual law school tuition. Then he met Rebecca from the wealthy Hamilton family, and suddenly I wasn't good enough to be his brother anymore. I never thought family could be erased so easily. But when Trevor tried to erase me from his life, I erased his tuition payments and watched his perfect facade crumble. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about family betrayals and standing up for yourself. Trevor and I weren't always like this. For 10 years, we were all each other had. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 22 and Trevor was only 16. It happened on a rainy Tuesday night. They were coming back from their anniversary dinner when a drunk driver crossed into their lane. I still remember getting that call at 2 a.m. during my senior year of college. My whole world collapsed in an instant. I was studying computer science and had a promising job lined up after graduation. But everything changed that night. With no other family to step up. The choice was clear. I had to be there for Trevor. I dropped out of college with just one semester left, moved back to our childhood home, and became Trevor's legal guardian. Those first years were incredibly difficult. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously: morning shifts at a warehouse, afternoon IT support at a local company, and weekend bartending. I'd come home exhausted but still make time to help Trevor with homework, attend his school events, and make sure he had some semblance of normalcy. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. "You don't have to do all this," Trevor would say sometimes, seeing me exhausted. "Yes, I do. We're brothers. This is what family does," I'd always answer. Despite the financial struggles, we had good times too. Sunday nights became our sacred tradition. No matter how busy the week ahead looked, we'd order pizza, watch movies, and just talk about life. Trevor would share his dreams of becoming a lawyer, inspired by a constitutional law class he took in high school. "When I'm a big-shot attorney, I'm buying you a house," he promised with the confidence only teenagers have. "You won't have to work so hard anymore." Those words meant everything to me during those tough years. Eventually, things got better. I taught myself advanced programming while Trevor slept and built a few apps that gained traction. By the time Trevor was applying for colleges, I had started my own tech company that was beginning to take off. It wasn't making me rich yet, but it meant I could focus on growing the business while still supporting Trevor. The day Trevor got accepted to Georgetown University for his undergraduate degree was one of the proudest moments of my life. He got a partial scholarship, but I covered the rest without hesitation. I wanted him to focus solely on his studies, not work part-time jobs like I had to. "You deserve this," I told him on move-in day, helping carry boxes into his dorm room. "Just make the most of it." And he did. Trevor thrived in college, maintaining a near-perfect GPA and becoming president of the Pre-Law Society. During his graduation ceremony, he actually mentioned me in his speech as class valedictorian. "Everything I've accomplished is because of my brother Marcus," he said to the crowd. "When life took our parents, he became my parent, my brother, and my best friend all in one. He's my hero." I'm not ashamed to admit I cried that day. All the sacrifices seemed worth it in that moment. When Trevor got accepted to Columbia Law School 3 years ago, we celebrated for a week straight. It was his dream school, and though the $75,000 annual tuition was steep, my company had grown significantly by then. I could afford it, and I wanted to give Trevor the best chance at success. "This is an investment in our family's future," I told him when he expressed concern about the cost. "You'll be an amazing lawyer. I believe in you." For the first 2 years of law school, Trevor remained the grateful, humble brother I'd raised. He'd call me multiple times a week, visit during breaks, and always acknowledge the sacrifices I'd made. He lived modestly in a small apartment near campus, focused on his studies, and seemed destined for a bright future. Then, at the beginning of his final year of law school, everything changed. Trevor met Rebecca at a law school networking event. She came from the Hamilton family, old money with deep connections in legal circles. According to Trevor, they hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared interest in corporate law. The first few times Trevor mentioned Rebecca, he seemed genuinely smitten. I was happy for him. But I noticed small changes almost immediately. He started canceling our weekly phone calls. His texts became shorter and less frequent. When he did call, he'd talk exclusively about Rebecca and her family. Her father is a senior partner at Hamilton and Associates. Can you believe it? And they have a summer house in the Hamptons where all the partners vacation. During one of Trevor's visits home, I noticed he was wearing a watch I didn't recognize, a Rolex that must have cost thousands. Early graduation gift from Rebecca, he explained casually when I asked. As if receiving such expensive gifts was normal. I also noticed changes in how Trevor talked. His vocabulary shifted, adopting phrases and opinions that sounded rehearsed. He started referring to people as nouveau riche and discussing the importance of proper social connections. These were the first warning signs. But I ignored them, chalking it up to the excitement of a new relationship. I had no idea how much worse things would get. Trevor met Rebecca Hamilton during a law school mixer for second and third year students. According to the story he initially told me, Rebecca approached him after he made an impressive comment during a discussion about a recent Supreme Court case. They exchanged numbers, got coffee the next day, and were inseparable after that. Rebecca came from a family that could trace their wealth back 5 generations. The Hamiltons weren't just rich. They were American aristocracy with connections to politicians, judges, and corporate leaders across the country. Her father Harold Hamilton ran one of the most prestigious law firms in New York, while her mother Elizabeth organized charity galas and sat on the boards of several cultural institutions. During their first month of dating, Trevor would call me excitedly after every date. I could hear the infatuation in his voice. "You won't believe the restaurant we went to last night, Marcus. The chef came out personally to greet her family. They have a private table they reserve year-round." I was slightly concerned about the obvious wealth disparity, but I kept those thoughts to myself. Trevor deserved happiness. And who was I to judge his relationship based on Rebecca's background? What I didn't realize then was that Trevor had already begun crafting a different narrative about his own background when speaking to Rebecca. I discovered later that he had deliberately omitted mentioning me or the struggles we'd faced. Instead, he'd vaguely referred to being raised by family friends after a tragedy. He never explicitly lied in those early days, but his omissions laid the groundwork for the fabrications that would come later. About 3 months into their relationship, Trevor was invited to dinner at the Hamilton family estate in Connecticut. He called me beforehand, uncharacteristically nervous. "This is a big deal, Marcus. The Hamiltons don't usually invite people to their home unless they're serious about them." I helped Trevor pick out an appropriate outfit and gave him a pep talk about being himself. I remember my parting words clearly. "Just be the amazing person you are. That's more than enough." When Trevor returned from that dinner, something had fundamentally changed. He was quieter, more reserved, and seemed almost ashamed when looking at my modest 3-bedroom house that I'd worked so hard to afford. "How did it go?" I asked, pouring him a beer as we sat on my back porch. "It was educational," he replied carefully. "Their house is more like a museum. Everything is perfect, historic. Mr. Hamilton has a library with first editions worth more than most houses." As Trevor described the evening, I noticed him emphasizing the Hamiltons' subtle displays of disdain toward new money and self-made success stories. "Mr. Hamilton says entrepreneurs are just glorified salesmen," Trevor said, not meeting my eyes, though my entire success came from entrepreneurship. He says old money understands responsibility to society in a way nouveau riche never will. That night marked the beginning of Trevor's transformation. Over the next few months, I watched my brother become someone I barely recognized. His speech patterns changed dramatically, adopting the precise, measured cadence of Harold Hamilton. He began using phrases like, "our kind of people," and "proper upbringing." Trevor traded his casual wardrobe for tailored suits and expensive loafers. He changed his haircut to something more conservative, and even adjusted his accent slightly, softening certain vowels in a way that sounded vaguely Northeastern elite. Most painfully, he began making subtle criticisms about my lifestyle and business practices. "Do you really need to dress so casually for client meetings?" he asked once while visiting my office. "First impressions matter in business circles." Another time, while discussing a new contract my company had secured. "It's impressive for what it is. But have you considered more established clients? The Hamiltons say reputation is built on who you work with, not just the work itself." Each comment stung more than the last. This wasn't the brother I'd raised. This was someone performing for an audience that wasn't even present. 5 months into their relationship, Trevor and I had our first major argument. He'd invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant to meet Rebecca for the first time. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in my best suit. Trevor and Rebecca were already there, deep in conversation with another couple that Rebecca introduced as family friends. Throughout dinner, Trevor repeatedly cut me off when I began sharing stories from our past. When I mentioned our Sunday movie traditions, Trevor quickly interjected. "That was just a phase in college," he said dismissively. "I've always preferred classic literature to television." This was blatantly false. Trevor had been a huge Marvel fan and could quote entire movies from memory. When Rebecca asked about my business, Trevor answered before I could speak. "Marcus runs a small tech startup. Nothing too complex, just basic apps and websites. My company employed 30 people and had recently been valued at $8 million. There was nothing small or basic about it." After dinner, when Rebecca excused herself to the restroom, I confronted Trevor. "What's going on with you? You've been undermining me all night." Trevor's expression hardened. "I'm not undermining you. I'm just contextualizing. Rebecca's family moves in different circles. They wouldn't understand your business model or our background." "Our background? You mean the fact that I raised you after our parents died? That I worked 3 jobs to put food on the table? That I paid for your education?" Trevor looked around anxiously, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Keep your voice down. Yes, and I'm grateful, but those details aren't exactly dinner conversation with the Hamiltons. I'm not asking you to write a memoir, Trevor. But I won't sit here while you pretend to be someone you're not." Trevor's apology afterward felt hollow. "I'm sorry if you felt disrespected. That wasn't my intention. I'm just navigating a complex social situation." The distance between us grew after that night. Trevor visited less frequently, and our phone calls became rare. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, constantly checking the time or steering conversations toward superficial topics. The brother who once called me his hero was disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone who seemed embarrassed by our shared history and my very existence. 6 months after Trevor met Rebecca, they announced their engagement. I found out through a text message. Not even a phone call. The text was brief and formal. "Rebecca and I are engaged. There will be an announcement party at the Hamilton estate next Saturday at 7 p.m. No excitement, no personal touch. Nothing that indicated this message was from the brother I'd raised for 10 years. I waited for a formal invitation to arrive, but nothing came. 3 days before the event, I texted Trevor asking about details. "The invitation must have gotten lost in the mail," he replied, though it seemed unlikely. "I'll have Rebecca's assistant send you the information." An hour later, I received an email from someone named Margaret, with a PDF attachment containing the event details. The tone was coldly professional. At the bottom was a note: black tie required. No exceptions. I rented a tuxedo for the occasion and drove 2 hours to the Hamilton estate in Connecticut. The property was intimidating, a sprawling colonial mansion set on acres of manicured grounds with a gated entrance staffed by security personnel. Name? Asked the suited man at the entrance. Marcus Wilson. I'm Trevor's brother. He scanned his list, frowning slightly. I have a Marcus Wilson, but you're listed as a friend of the groom, not family. My stomach dropped. But I forced a smile. Must be a clerical error. Inside, the mansion was even more imposing. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, antique furniture dotted the rooms, and staff in formal attire circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I felt distinctly out of place despite my rented tuxedo. I spotted Trevor across the room, standing with Rebecca and an older couple I assumed were her parents. He looked different, his posture stiffer, his smile more restrained. When he saw me, there was a momentary flash of panic in his eyes before he composed himself and walked over. Marcus, you made it, he said, keeping his voice low. Listen, before you meet Rebecca's parents, there's something you should know. What's that? Trevor glanced around nervously. The Hamiltons are very traditional. They place enormous value on family history and background. So I may have adjusted certain details about our past. Nothing major, just simplifying things. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared at Trevor's side, followed by her parents. She was beautiful in an understated way, with perfect posture and a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. You must be Marcus, she said, extending her hand. Trevor's friend from school. Friend? Not brother? I shook her hand, too stunned to correct her. And these are my parents, Harold and Elizabeth Hamilton, Rebecca continued. Harold Hamilton was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. His handshake was firm but brief, as if he didn't want to maintain contact for too long. Trevor tells us you run some sort of computer business, he said, his tone making it sound like I sold used parts from my garage. Yes, a software development company, I replied, glancing at Trevor, who was studying his shoes intently. Fascinating, Elizabeth Hamilton said with obvious disinterest. Trevor mentioned you were close with his guardian family after his parents passed. So kind of you to stay in touch. Guardian family? I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. I looked at Trevor, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, silently pleading with me to play along. If you'll excuse us, Harold said, already turning away. We need to greet the Astors. They just arrived. As they walked away with Trevor and Rebecca in tow, I stood frozen in disbelief. I needed air, needed to make sense of what had just happened. I made my way to a less crowded part of the house, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I thought I was alone until I heard voices from behind a partially open door to what appeared to be a study. Your friend Marcus seems interesting. Harold Hamilton's voice carried clearly. He's been a good friend, Trevor replied. Known him since college. Rebecca mentioned he was somehow involved with your upbringing. What exactly was that situation? I find it all rather unclear. There was a pause before Trevor spoke again. His words would forever change our relationship. After my parents died, I was raised by family friends in Boston. Old family connections of my mother's. Marcus was their son. We lived together briefly, and he helped me through a difficult time. I see, Harold replied. And your family's background? Banking. Wasn't it? Another pause, longer this time. Yes, investment banking primarily. Old Boston money, unfortunately lost in some poor investments after my parents' passing. That's why I lived with friends. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Trevor wasn't just omitting the truth, he was fabricating an entirely fictional past. One where I was reduced from brother and guardian to a casual acquaintance. One where our working-class parents were transformed into wealthy bankers. One where his struggle and my sacrifices never existed. I left the library and found a bathroom where I locked myself in for several minutes, trying to process this betrayal. When I emerged, I sought out Trevor, finding him momentarily alone near the bar. "We need to talk. Now." My voice was low but firm. Trevor glanced around nervously before following me to a quiet corner of the terrace. "What the hell was that?" I demanded once we were alone. "Family friends? Old Boston money? Have you lost your mind?" Trevor's expression hardened. "You don't understand the world Rebecca comes from. The Hamiltons wouldn't approve of someone from my actual background. They value lineage. Tradition. So you're ashamed of where you come from? Ashamed of me?" "I'm not ashamed," Trevor insisted, though his eyes said otherwise. "I'm being pragmatic. The Hamiltons can open doors for my career that would remain closed otherwise. Harold has already promised me a position at his firm after graduation. At the cost of denying your own brother? Denying everything I've done for you?" Trevor lowered his voice. "It's just a narrative adjustment. It doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything," I said, feeling a cold anger replace my initial shock. "You stood in there and lied about who you are, who I am, who our parents were. I need you to play along," Trevor said, his tone suddenly pleading. "Just for now, until I'm established. Once I'm part of the family and firm, none of this will matter." I stared at my brother, this stranger wearing my brother's face, and felt something break inside me. "I raised you better than this." Without waiting for his response, I walked out of the party and drove home in a daze of betrayal and disbelief. The next morning, I received a text from Trevor that completed the betrayal. "I think it's best if you don't attend future events with the Hamilton family. Your presence complicates the narrative. I hope you understand this is for my future. Once everything is settled with the wedding and my position at the firm, we can figure out a way forward. In the meantime, please keep quiet about our background. I'm trusting you with this." I didn't respond. There were no words for the depth of this betrayal. For 2 weeks after the engagement party, I moved through life in a fog. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Trevor's words in my mind, searching for something I might have misunderstood or misheard. But the truth was undeniable. My brother had erased me from his life to impress his fiancée's family. I found myself looking through old photos at 3 in the morning, Trevor's high school graduation, his move into college, us goofing around on vacation. In every picture, his smile was genuine, his affection real. Or so I had thought. Had it all been an act? I wondered aloud one night, sitting in my home office surrounded by these memories. Was he just using me until something better came along? My girlfriend Ellison was my rock during this time. She'd come over and find me staring at these photos, lost in painful reflection. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said gently, taking the photo album from my hands. "You need to talk to someone about this. Maybe a therapist." "I don't need therapy. I need answers," I replied. My best friend Jason was less gentle in his assessment when I finally told him the full story over drinks. "Your brother is an ungrateful piece of work," he said bluntly. "After everything you've done for him? Man, I knew he was getting pretentious since meeting that girl, but this is another level. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently." I admitted. "Nothing," Jason said firmly. "You sacrificed your own dreams to raise him. You supported him emotionally and financially for 10 years. You're still paying his damn tuition. If anything, you've done too much." That last point hit me hard. I was still paying Trevor's $75,000 annual law school tuition. Despite everything, despite being erased from his life, I was still funding his education. The irony was bitter. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but for a different reason. I began looking through my financial records. Not only was I paying Trevor's tuition, but I had also been covering his rent, utilities, and giving him a monthly allowance for living expenses. All told, I was spending over $120,000 a year on Trevor. Out of curiosity, I logged into the credit card account I had given Trevor for emergencies. What I saw made my blood boil. There were charges from high-end clothing stores, expensive restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons, and a $5,000 charge from Tiffany & Company that I assumed was for Rebecca's engagement ring. Trevor wasn't just hiding me from his new life. He was using my money to fund the facade. He was living like a Hamilton while still depending entirely on the brother he was ashamed to acknowledge. The next morning, I called Allison. "I think I've been enabling Trevor," I said when she picked up. "What do you mean?" "I'm still paying for everything. His tuition, his apartment, his lifestyle. I'm funding the very lie he's using to erase me." There was a pause before Allison responded. "What are you going to do about it?" That question crystallized something in my mind. What was I going to do about it? Trevor had made his choice. He couldn't have it both ways, denying our relationship while benefiting from my financial support. "I'm cutting him off," I said. The decision's suddenly clear. "Completely." "Are you sure?" Allison asked. "That's a big step." "I'm sure. He can't erase me from his life and keep my money. That's not how this works." Once the decision was made, I approached it methodically. First, I consulted with Mr. Sullivan, the family lawyer who had helped me set up the trust fund for Trevor's education after our parents died. "Legally, you're under no obligation to continue funding Trevor's education," Mr. Sullivan confirmed after reviewing the documents. "The trust was voluntary, and you maintain full control as trustee. What's the proper procedure for terminating it?" "I can draft a formal notice." "We should document everything, the terms of the original arrangement, your consistent fulfillment of those terms, and Trevor's recent actions that constitute a breach of the familial understanding." Over the next week, I gathered evidence. I documented all the financial support I'd provided over the years. I saved Trevor's text messages asking me not to attend Hamilton family events and to hide our true relationship. I printed statements from the credit card showing his extravagant spending. I also carefully timed my move. Trevor's fall semester tuition was due in 2 weeks. The law school required payment in full before students could register for classes. I knew Trevor had no savings of his own. He never needed them with me covering everything. I also knew from our previous conversations that while the Hamiltons were wealthy, they valued self-sufficiency and had not offered to pay for Trevor's education. Harold Hamilton had made comments about young people earning their way, despite his family's privilege. Trevor had found their approval by pretending to be someone he wasn't, not by asking for financial help. The plan was set. I would formally terminate all financial support exactly 1 week before tuition was due. Trevor would have to either come clean to the Hamiltons about his true background and financial situation or find some other way to pay for his final year of law school. Part of me felt guilty about the potential consequences for Trevor's education. But a stronger part recognized that this was the natural result of his own choices. As Jason had bluntly put it when I shared my plan, actions have consequences. It's about time he learned that. The night before executing my plan, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the last family photo taken of me and Trevor before everything changed. It was from his law school orientation 2 years earlier. His arm was around my shoulders, both of us smiling widely with Columbia Law School in the background. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said to the photo. "But you left me no choice." The next morning, I called Mr. Sullivan and gave him the go-ahead to send the formal notification. The letter from Mr. Sullivan was delivered to Trevor's apartment via courier on a Monday morning, exactly 1 week before his fall tuition was due. I had instructed Mr. Sullivan to be thorough but compassionate in his wording. The document formally notified Trevor that effective immediately, all financial support would be terminated. This included tuition payments, rent subsidies, utility payments, credit card privileges, and his monthly allowance. The letter explained that this decision was not made lightly but was a consequence of Trevor's explicit request to distance himself from our family relationship. I knew Trevor received the letter because he called me 17 times in the span of 2 hours. I let each call go to voicemail. Around the 15th call, I listened to one of his messages. "Marcus, this has to be some kind of joke. Call me back immediately. The tuition is due next week. Is this because of what happened at the engagement party? You're overreacting. Call me back. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. No apology. Just entitlement and accusation." I also had a box of Trevor's belongings from my house, childhood photos, trophies, books, and mementos, delivered to his apartment the same day. The message was clear, the severance was complete. Trevor's texts grew increasingly desperate as the day progressed. "This isn't funny anymore. Call me back. You can't just cut me off without warning. What am I supposed to tell the law school? They're expecting payment. Is this really how you want to end our relationship? Over one misunderstanding?" By evening, the tone had shifted to threats. "You're just jealous of my relationship with Rebecca. This is pathetic. I'll tell everyone what you're doing. How you're trying to sabotage my future out of spite. You have no right to withdraw support you promised. I'll talk to a lawyer about this." The next day, the calls stopped. Instead, I received one carefully worded email. "Marcus, I understand you're upset about some things I may have said or done. Perhaps I wasn't as appreciative as I should have been. But making rash decisions about my education isn't the answer. Let's meet and talk this through like adults. This is my final year of law school. Everything I've worked for hangs in the balance." Still no direct acknowledgement of the betrayal. Still treating it as a minor indiscretion rather than a complete denial of our relationship. I didn't respond. 3 days after the letter was delivered, I received a call from Jason, who had a friend who worked as an administrative assistant at Columbia Law School. "Trevor showed up at the financial aid office having a complete meltdown," Jason reported. "He was told his tuition payment was overdue with no extension possible. Apparently, he tried to apply for last-minute loans but was rejected due to the late timing. That same evening, Allison forwarded me an Instagram post from Rebecca. It showed her and Trevor at a charity gala, smiling broadly with the Hamiltons and another wealthy couple. The caption read, "Celebrating with family and our dear friends the Vanderbilts. Perfect evening with perfect company." The facade was still holding, but cracks were beginning to show. On day 5, Trevor showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant texted me that he was in the lobby, demanding to see me. "Should I call security?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "No. Send him in." Trevor looked terrible when he walked into my office. His normally perfectly styled hair was disheveled. His eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He was wearing one of his expensive Hamilton-approved suits, but it was wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it. "You have to stop this," he said without preamble. "The law school is threatening to drop me. They won't let me register for classes without payment." I gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing. "Did you read Mr. Sullivan's letter carefully?" I asked calmly. "Of course I read it. It's ridiculous. You can't just cut me off without warning after supporting me for years." The letter explained the reason for the termination of support. "Would you like me to refresh your memory?" Trevor's expression darkened. "If this is about what I said at the engagement party, it's about who you've become," I interrupted. "It's about you erasing me from your life while still expecting me to fund it." "I didn't erase you. I just simplified things for Rebecca's family." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder containing printouts of Trevor's texts and emails. I read aloud. I think it's best if you don't attend future events with the Hamilton family. Your presence complicates the narrative. Trevor paled slightly but quickly recovered. You're taking that out of context. Am I? How about telling the Hamiltons that you were raised by family friends after our parents died? How about claiming you came from old Boston money? How about introducing me as your friend from college, not your brother who raised you for 10 years? With each accusation, Trevor seemed to shrink a little more. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame cross his face. You don't understand the pressure, he said finally. The Hamiltons wouldn't accept someone from my actual background. Harold Hamilton only respects certain kinds of people. And I'm not one of those people. Trevor looked away. It's not personal. It's just how their world works. It is personal, Trevor. You denied me. You denied our parents. You denied everything we went through together. And you did it while still taking my money to maintain your fake identity. I placed another document on the desk, his credit card statement with the excessive charges highlighted. You used my money to buy the engagement ring for Rebecca, didn't you? Trevor's silence was answer enough. You can't have it both ways, I said firmly. You can't erase me from your life and keep my money. That's not how this works. That's not how family works. What am I supposed to do about tuition? Trevor asked, his voice smaller now. About rent? About everything? You have options, I replied. You could tell the Hamiltons the truth and ask for their help. You could apply for student loans like most law students. You could get a part-time job. You could defer your final year until you figure things out. The Hamiltons would never understand. They'd think I lied to them. The irony of this statement seemed lost on Trevor. You did lie to them, I pointed out. Extensively and deliberately. Trevor ran his hands through his hair in frustration. This will ruin everything I've built with Rebecca, with her family. If your relationship can't survive the truth, what kind of relationship is it? This question hung in the air between us. Trevor had no answer. You made your choice, I said finally. You chose the Hamiltons and their world over honesty and family. Now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. Trevor stared at me for a long moment. A complex mix of emotions crossing his face: anger, fear, resentment, and finally, a glimmer of understanding. So that's it? After everything, you're just cutting me off? You cut me off first, I replied quietly. I'm just making it official. Trevor left my office without another word. As I watched him go, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, and I had stood my ground. Now I could only wait to see what happened next. The consequences of my decision rippled outward quickly. 3 days after our confrontation, I received a brief email from Columbia Law School confirming that my recurring tuition payment had been cancelled as requested. The formal tone masked what must have been a difficult situation for Trevor. I maintained my distance, but information still reached me through various channels. Jason's friend at the law school administration reported that Trevor had been placed on financial hold, preventing him from registering for classes until his outstanding balance was paid. He had apparently requested emergency loans but was denied due to the size of the amount needed and the lateness of the application. He's in full panic mode, Jason told me over lunch a week later. My friend said he's been calling the financial aid office daily, trying to work out some arrangement. But $75,000 isn't something they can just waive or defer indefinitely. Around this time, I noticed Trevor's social media presence with the Hamiltons continued unabated. There were photos of yacht outings, dinner parties, and charity events. In each image, Trevor maintained the perfect smile and polished appearance of someone who belonged in that world. To anyone looking from the outside, nothing had changed. But cracks were beginning to show. A mutual friend from Trevor's undergraduate years, Kyle, reached out to me unexpectedly. I ran into Trevor at a bar last night, Kyle said when we spoke on the phone. He was alone, which was unusual these days. He seemed off. When I asked about law school, he got defensive and changed the subject. Then he borrowed $200, claiming he'd left his wallet at home. I've never seen him like that. 2 weeks after our confrontation, the most significant crack appeared. Allison's friend worked at the same company as Rebecca's cousin and overheard a conversation about trouble in paradise. Apparently, the Hamiltons are asking questions, Allison reported. Trevor missed some important family dinner because he was meeting with financial aid advisors. He made up an excuse about academic commitments. But Rebecca's father called the law school to arrange some kind of special recognition for Trevor, and learned he wasn't registered for classes. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. I maintained my resolve not to reach out to Trevor directly, but I did keep track of the situation through these secondary sources. Part of me felt guilty about the potential damage to his education, but another part recognized that this was the natural consequence of his choices. He had built his relationship with the Hamiltons on lies, and lies eventually collapsed under their own weight. 3 weeks into the fall semester, the dam broke. Cal called me on a Tuesday evening. "You need to check Rebecca's Instagram," he said without preamble. I wasn't following Rebecca anymore, but a quick search brought up her profile. Her most recent post was from earlier that day. A somber, black and white selfie with a cryptic caption. "When the person you thought you knew turns out to be a stranger. Trust broken cannot easily be repaired. #betrayed #moving forward." The comments section was filled with sympathetic responses from friends and family members, including Elizabeth Hamilton. "You deserve nothing but honesty and integrity. Darling. Some people simply aren't raised with proper values." The irony of that statement was not lost on me. The next day, the situation clarified further when Kyle texted me a screenshot of a social media update from one of Trevor's law school classmates. "Drama in 3L year. TW. Apparently lied about his entire life to his fiancée's family, got cut off by his brother, who was actually paying his tuition, and now isn't even registered for classes. Rich girl family found out everything and went ballistic. Engagement over." I felt a complex mixture of emotions reading this. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that the truth had finally emerged, but also genuine sadness for Trevor. Despite everything, he was still my brother, and I knew how devastating this must be for him. Over the next few days, Trevor's carefully curated social media presence disappeared entirely. His Instagram account was deactivated. His LinkedIn profile was stripped of any mentions of the Hamilton family connections or future employment at their firm. He had effectively vanished from the digital world. A week later, I received confirmation of just how completely Trevor's world had collapsed. Mr. Sullivan forwarded me an email from Columbia Law School's administration. Regarding Mr. Trevor Wilson's enrollment status, we regret to inform you that due to non-payment of tuition and failure to make alternative arrangements within the grace period, Mr. Wilson's enrollment in the JD program has been suspended. He may apply for readmission in future semesters pending resolution of his financial obligations. Trevor had lost his place in law school just months before graduation. His education was derailed, his engagement was over, and his connections to the Hamilton family were severed. The perfect future he had sacrificed our relationship for had evaporated completely. Jason was blunt in his assessment when I shared this news. "Can't say he didn't have it coming. You reap what you sow." Allison was more compassionate. "I know he hurt you terribly, but this is still so sad. All of this could have been avoided if he'd just been honest from the beginning." She was right, of course. The tragedy wasn't just the collapse of Trevor's carefully constructed facade, it was that it had been unnecessary from the start. People fall in love across class lines every day. If Rebecca had truly loved Trevor, his background shouldn't have mattered. And if it did matter to her or her family, then perhaps they weren't the right people for him anyway. For all his intelligence and education, Trevor had failed to understand this basic truth. Instead, He had sacrificed authentic relationships for the illusion of belonging in a world that would never truly accept him as he was. As I processed these developments, I received one final piece of information that confirmed the totality of Trevor's fall from grace. A mutual acquaintance who worked at a law firm where Trevor had once in turn mentioned seeing him at a local coffee shop. He was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, not his usual fancy suits, she reported. He was filling out an application for a barista position. I pretended not to see him because he looked like he didn't want to be recognized. The image of Trevor, who had once aspired to become a high-powered attorney in a prestigious firm, applying for a coffee shop job was the final confirmation of how completely his world had collapsed. I had cut off his tuition and watched his perfect facade crumble. His fairy tale was over. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt a profound sadness for what could have been. For the relationship we had lost, and for the difficult road that lay ahead for both of us. Nearly 2 months passed without any direct contact from Trevor. I heard occasional updates through mutual acquaintances. He had moved out of his expensive apartment into a much smaller place in a less desirable neighborhood. He was working at the coffee shop. He had withdrawn from social circles entirely. Each update brought mixed feelings, vindication that justice had been served, but also concern for his well-being. Then, on a rainy Sunday evening in November, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, Trevor was standing there, soaking wet without an umbrella. He looked nothing like the polished law student who had been ashamed to introduce me as his brother. His designer clothes were replaced by jeans and a worn hoodie. The confident posture was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders. Most strikingly, the artifice had disappeared from his eyes, leaving only raw vulnerability. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Whatever was about to happen, we both needed closure. Trevor stood awkwardly in my living room, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. He seemed unsure where to begin. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 different ways," he finally said. "Nothing seems adequate. Just say what you came to say," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Trevor took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for everything. For denying you as my brother. For lying about our past. For taking your support for granted while trying to erase you from my life." His voice cracked. "There's no excuse for what I did. None." The apology seemed genuine, but I needed more than words. "Why did you do it? Really?" Trevor sank onto the couch, shoulders hunched. "When I met Rebecca and her family, I felt inadequate. The Hamiltons had everything: money, connections, prestige. Generations of success. Next to them, my achievements seemed small, unimpressive. And I was part of what made you feel inadequate." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "No. Yes. Not you personally. But our background. The Hamiltons talked about bloodlines and family history like it was currency. I couldn't compete with that. So I created a version of myself that could. By erasing me. By erasing everything I did for you." Trevor winced. "Yes. It was unforgivable. I convinced myself it was just a temporary strategy, that once I was established in their world, the details wouldn't matter anymore." He shook his head. "I was delusional." "What happened with the Hamiltons? With Rebecca?" I asked, though I already knew most of it. Trevor's expression crumbled. "When I couldn't register for classes, Harold Hamilton started asking questions. He called the dean directly. They were old friends, of course. Everything unraveled from there. Rebecca confronted me, and I finally told her the truth. All of it. How did she take it? She was disgusted. Not because of my actual background, but because I'd lied so extensively. She said she might have understood financial struggles, but she could never trust someone who would fabricate an entire identity." Trevor's voice was hollow. "The engagement ended that day. Harold Hamilton made some calls, and my job offer at their firm was rescinded. I was cut off from their entire social circle overnight. The room fell silent as I absorbed this. Part of me felt that justice had been served, but seeing Trevor so broken brought no joy. I lost everything. Trevor continued after a moment. My education, my relationship, my future career. But the worst loss was you. I threw away the one person who had always been there for me, who sacrificed everything to raise me, who believed in me when no one else did. Tears were flowing freely now. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did. I recognized the depth of my betrayal. I studied my brother, the real Trevor, stripped of pretense and performance. Despite everything, I still saw glimpses of the boy I'd raised, the brother I'd loved. What are you doing now? I asked. Working at Greenleaf Coffee. The pay barely covers rent for my studio apartment. I'm trying to save enough to pay back some of what I owe the law school, maybe re-enroll someday, but it's going to take years. He attempted a weak smile. Turns out I make decent lattes, though. Despite myself, I felt a glimmer of respect for this humility. Trevor wasn't asking for money or an easy way out. He was taking responsibility for his actions. And what do you want from me? I asked directly. Trevor shook his head. Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. I just wanted to apologize face to face. You deserve that much at least. We talked for hours that night. Trevor shared more details about his spectacular fall from grace, and I shared how his betrayal had affected me. The conversation was painful but necessary. By the time he left, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step on a very long road toward healing. In the months that followed, Trevor and I established a cautious, limited relationship. We met occasionally for coffee, keeping our conversations light at first, then gradually addressing deeper issues. He continued working at the coffee shop, eventually being promoted to shift manager. He found a roommate to share expenses and enrolled in night classes at a community college to keep his education moving forward. I made it clear that I wouldn't be resuming financial support. That chapter of our relationship was closed permanently. Trevor never asked. Instead, he seemed determined to rebuild his life through his own efforts, however modest they might be compared to his previous ambitions. There were difficult moments. Sometimes seeing Trevor reminded me too strongly of his betrayal, and I would pull back from contact for weeks at a time. Sometimes he would fall into depression about how drastically his life had changed, how far away his law career now seemed. But there were also encouraging signs. The new Trevor was more authentic, more grounded. Without the pressure to perform for the Hamiltons, he rediscovered parts of himself that had been suppressed, his quirky sense of humor, his passion for volunteer work, his genuine interest in legal aid for disadvantaged communities. 6 months after our reconciliation began, Trevor met me for lunch with news. I've been accepted back into Columbia's law program, he said, his expression cautiously hopeful. Not for this year, but next fall. I've qualified for financial aid and taken out loans for the rest. It won't be the same path I was on before, but I'll get there eventually. That's great, Trevor, I said and meant it. I'm proud of you for figuring this out on your own. His eyes welled up at those words. That means more than you know. This experience taught me profound lessons about family, boundaries, and self-respect. I learned that supporting someone doesn't mean enabling their worst behaviors. I learned that true love sometimes requires difficult decisions and painful consequences. Most importantly, I learned that while betrayal damages trust, it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Trevor and I will never have the same relationship we once did. The betrayal created a fracture that will always leave a visible scar. But we're building something new, something based on mutual respect, honesty, and the recognition of each other's boundaries. It's a more mature relationship in many ways, one where either of us takes the other for granted. As for Trevor, he learned the hardest possible way that you can't build a meaningful life on lies, that authenticity matters more than status. And that true connection comes from being known and accepted for who you really are. Sometimes I think about the alternate universe where Trevor never met Rebecca Hamilton, where he graduated law school with my support and entered a career with gratitude for the path that brought him there. But that universe wouldn't have taught either of us the lessons we needed to learn. Sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most transformative. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt someone you loved because it was the right thing to do? Or have you experienced betrayal from someone close to you and had to decide whether to forgive them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family relationships, difficult choices, and the journey toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who need to learn difficult lessons.